We have the great pleasure of being joined this afternoon by Matthew Ho. He is a Green Party candidate for Senate down in North Carolina, who's been the subject of a lot of our short-form segments, so it's great to have you here to get the story from you. Thank you so much, Matthew.
Hey, thanks, guys, for having me on.
Sure thing. Sure thing. I can tell you're used to doing these interviews. You got that great microphone now. You're all set and ready to go. You're becoming a pro at this.
There's a story. This is the pandemic purchase. A couple of years ago, I was supposed to do a podcast for Apple, and you couldn't go into a studio. So they told me, buy this microphone and get in a closet, and they had me put all my clothes around me to create my own little booth, I guess. And but now it's a terrific microphone. And it does
fantastic.
Help quite a bit.
Yeah, your voice sounds warm and rich. You sound like a podcaster. You sound like
I have a feeling it doesn't really translate that well in real life, though.
Well, maybe I'll find out when I come to one of your rallies. But yeah, thank you so much. So why don't you just give a little background? I mean, I think your story, even before all of this stuff started happening with the Democrats tampering with your signatures and getting you off the ballot, I think your story is a fascinating one even before that. So why don't you just introduce yourself, who you are, what compelled you to run, and what compelled you to run as a Green?
Sure. I was in the Marine Corps for 10 years. I went to war 3 times with the State Department as well. In 2009, I finally had, I was beyond, just the simplest way to express it, morally and intellectually broken. I was with the State Department in Afghanistan, and I resigned in protest over the escalation of the war that year. And that brought me into the anti-war community, brought me into the media, brought me into the think tank world. And through the last 12 years, I've been involved in differing degrees of activism, whether, in Congress, talking to members of Congress, or on the streets, getting arrested, trying to stand up for other folks out there. And about a year ago, the Green Party reached out to me and said, would you like to run? And I had never even been affiliated with a political party before the Green Party, and certainly had never been a candidate. And, thought about it for a little bit, saw the issues, saw things that were occurring, just the continual drumbeat of suffering that goes on around us. And including the people I love, people who can't go to the doctor unless they check their banking account, right? People in my neighborhood who are losing homes because corporations are coming in, purchasing the homes, and then jacking up their rent, and these folks have to move. I mean, and on and on and on. The number of people I know who've died of overdose. If you're a combat veteran, I know 6 people, right? I mean, wow. Like in North Carolina here, we have 12 people die a day from opioid overdose. If that's not indication that the war on drugs is a complete and abject failure and is ruinous to our communities, along with the mass incarceration piece of it, then I don't know what would be that indication. And so, if someone is not on the ballot representing those issues, and the people who are the constituency of those issues are not being represented at all. And so that's what we're trying to do down here in North Carolina, is represent the working class, represent the middle class, because they are otherwise not represented by the 2 parties that are beholden to corporate and bank interests.
So, you're running as a Green in North Carolina. You submitted about 22,000 signatures, which is about 9,000 more than you need, right? You need a little more than 13 to get on the ballot.
Right.
Almost 16,000 of those were certified. And then what happened?
So as you said, we turned in here more than 22,500. We ended up having almost 2,100 more verified signatures than we needed. The signatures are verified by the county, and it's not uncommon for signatures not to be verified. In fact, the rule of thumb basically is that every 4 signatures you turn in, only 3 are going to count. And that's just not for here in North Carolina. That's across the country. Oftentimes your verification rate is less than that, 70% or 65%, just the way petitioning works. There's nothing nefarious about that. So we turned in our signatures. Again, we had more than 2,100 signatures than were necessary that were verified by the county boards of elections, who are the verification authority for the state. We turned in to the state board of elections our signatures on June 1st. It's important to note that we had a July 1st deadline to be certified by. And not only did the state have to certify us by that deadline, we also then had to hold a nominating convention. We had to have our folks go out and register as Green Party members, and we had to have our candidates file. So there's a whole host of things that had to occur after we were certified to demonstrate how this was entirely done in bad faith by the state. The state chose not to hold its certification meeting until June 30th, which would have given us less than a day to get all those other things done in order to be on the ballot. So right away, there's just bad faith right in front of us here. But what happens is we turn in our signatures to the North Carolina State Board of Elections, the 15,953 verified ones. And the state says, well, there are these 200 signatures that we're concerned about. And these were 200 signatures that weren't even part of that 15,953 total. These were signatures that had not been verified by the counties, that the counties had kind of pointed out like, hey, this is odd. The state looked at these signatures for 30 days. They found no evidence of fraud, nothing, that would indicate that we were out there doing something wrong. But their argument was that since there were these irregularities, that means there could be more. And because there could be more, we need more time to investigate. But because tomorrow's a deadline, we don't have that time, so we're not going to certify you. And there's all kind of layers to this. I think one of the things that strikes people about this is that this sounds an awful lot like the argument the Republicans were using, that Giuliani and his band of crooks were using to try and overturn the elections in court in 2020. This idea that there could be fraud. There are these theories of fraud, right? But we don't have the evidence, but there could be, so we can't let this go forward. That's basically what we ran into. This because there were irregularities, that provided the cover, as one of the people at the State Board of Elections said, a cloud hangs over all of this. And it's complete nonsense. It's just an excuse not to certify. It keeps us off the ballot. And so, we're fighting this, of course. And, we expect to earn, we expect to be on the ballot in November, which is a spot that we earned.
So just to make sure I have the timeline right, they informed you of all that stuff, of all of this like suspicion and the fact that they thought there was a cloud of doubt hanging over the validity of these signatures. They informed you that the day before the certification deadline?
Correct. We have been working with their folks, their investigators, over the 30 days. We have met with them repeatedly, given them all the documents. They were concerned about these 200 signatures. And my campaign manager had spoken with the lead investigator 2 days before this meeting. And that lead investigator had basically said, yeah, it's pretty much this. There's nothing really else, nothing, there's nothing here, I'm paraphrasing, but we were never given any indication that there was something greater or bigger or any reason why we wouldn't be certified. And then in the certification hearing, our attorney was allowed to ask one question through the whole process. And he said, Mr. Chairman.
Well, that sounds fair.
Right, exactly. He was allowed to give an opening statement, which he gave first before we even saw anything the state said. So we kind of went into this, and then they presented this could be argument, and we were just kind of really blindsided by that. No one ever, what do you mean could be? Of course, there could be a lot of things. I could be the Grand Duke of Monaco. There's all kinds of stuff that could be. But so anyway, our attorney was allowed to ask one question. Basically, he said, is there anything that puts into doubt any of the verified signatures that we turned in? And the chair refused to answer that question. When our attorney tried to follow up, the chair very angrily shouted him down and then muted his microphone.
Yeah, we played that video.
And then there was
that video drove me crazy. I wanted to jump through the screen.
Right, exactly, Russell. This is just the idea that there was any due process involved, that this was anything other than an over partisan decision. And I think what strikes people so much about this is how brazen it was. Right. And that's what I got throughout that hearing is just this attitude of like, we don't like this, so we're not going to prove it. And what are you going to do about it? Like this smugness that comes from the arrogance of power, and that's that's one of the reasons why we're running. This is one of the things we want to tear down, is that arrogance of power that leads to so much hurt and harm in our society so that others can get rich, right? This is why we're doing this. So the brazenness of it, though, because I've spoken to a lot of people in the last week and a half, almost 2 weeks since it occurred. And people who've been involved in politics for 30 years, whether they be political people, whether they be journalists, whoever, I've never seen anything like this, they say. I got on the phone right after the hearing with one journalist down here who's been covering North Carolina politics for like 2 decades. He's like, my head's spinning. I mean, like, I've never seen anything like that, And then the other part of it, too, is that it's unprecedented. This is not the standard. This is not what happens whenever someone turns in a petition or there's something similar. The State Board of Elections has not done this before in terms of scrutinizing and trying to find errors in the work that the County Board of Elections did. And remember, they didn't find any errors in 30 days. The chair of the Libertarian Party down here has been involved in these politics for 30 years. And what he said the other day was that, look, I've been involved in 8 petition efforts. Never once has a State Board of Elections looked at what the county has done and done anything like this. Similarly, one of the 2 Republican board members on the Board of Elections, there were 3 Democrats, 2 Republicans. One of the Republican board members said during the hearing, basically, this is unprecedented. We've never done this before. In 2020, we didn't check 1 signatures. The county did it. The counties did it all. We did nothing on that. I mean, so it is. There's a standard that's being applied to us that has never been applied before, and that is obviously meant to keep us off the ballot.
So it was the 3 Democrats that voted to decertify your signatures, right? In this, what looks like it's going to be a red wave year. That seems to me like what this is all about, that the Democrats know they're going to get their asses handed to them, and so they are just that desperate to the point where now they're doing this unprecedented thing of trying to peel off however many votes they think they're going to peel off, because I always think it's a fallacy to assume that green voters are would-be blue voters. I'm not a would-be blue voter. I voted for Hawkins last time. If I didn't vote for Hawkins, I would have just stayed home, found something else to do with the 20 minutes of my time.
Well, that's what all the polling has ever shown on that question.
Yeah. But I mean, that's what this strikes me as. And it's funny that you mentioned that one of the Republican board members mentioned how this was unprecedented. And this seems to me to be a real difference between Democrats and Republicans. I don't support either of them, obviously. That's one of the reasons why I'm interested in talking to guys like you. I've never in my life, not a single time, heard a Republican, after the Republicans lose narrowly, I've never one time in my life heard a Republican politician bitch about the Libertarians stealing their votes. Whereas every time the Democrats lose, I hear them bitching that the Green Party stole their votes. So
they did bitch about Ross Perot back in the day. He wasn't a libertarian, but
he was a major party candidate who took what, 18% of the vote. I've never heard of them, talking about.
Well, he wasn't a major party candidate. He was an independent.
I'm sorry, did I say major party? I meant a formidable, a really formidable, had a chance to. I mean, he took over 10% of the vote.
They did bitch about him for a long time.
Yeah, and then he had the Reform Party, which could have been something maybe. I mean, certainly had that opportunity, I guess. But I have.
But they didn't complain about Joe Jorgensen.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, if you look at the amount of votes that both, say, Gary Johnson and Evan McMullin got in 2016 compared to Jill Stein, I mean, it blows Stein's numbers out of the water. I think Stein got, I don't know, 1.5 million or something like that, and McMullin and Johnson got 6 million combined, if I can remember right. I mean, but if you do, and then even too, if you look in 2020, if you look at states. The argument never holds, because as you guys said, these are not people who are going to vote for the Republican or Democrat anyway. We had here in North Carolina, I was just reminded of this, in 2016, a Libertarian ran, and he got 100,000 votes. And and this is in the gubernatorial race, the governor's race in 2016. And that was more than the spread between the incumbent, the Republican, Pat McCrory, and the challenger, the Democrat, Roy Cooper. And so the Republicans here were upset by that. But there is also the reality that, first of all, this guy Cecil, who was running as a Libertarian, he's running on ending the war on drugs. He's running on ending the war overseas. He's running on ending corporate subsidies. He's running on gay marriage. He's running on trans rights. Those are nothing that any Republican candidate is going to run on. I mean, so the idea that it's not doing something, he's not, apologize for my dogs. He's not, that he's representing something that's equal to or overlaps or somehow splitting the vote is absolutely absurd. I mean, and that's the fear that the Democrats have, though, is that if we are on the ballot, we're able to represent a number of issues, and by extension, the people who those issues are the constituency for, right? In terms of, again, healthcare, housing,
Right.
jobs, education, things like that, things that the Democrats don't want to talk about because, particularly in the Senate race, their candidate is very much a corporate centrist. And actually, throughout the North Carolina race, the Democrats are running 15 candidates at the federal level here in North Carolina. Only one supports single-payer healthcare. 1 out of 15.
Wow.
The rest are all fine with the status quo that is killing people.
Well, that's a really interesting point because I never thought of that, but you're right. Like the Republicans don't run on issues. I mean, sorry, the Libertarians don't run on issues that Republicans claim to care about, whereas the Greens, you guys are running on issues that the Democrats want their voters to think they care about, like healthcare, housing, and things like that. So maybe that gets to one of the differences there. That's a good point. I never thought of it that way.
It's the lip service that the Democrats claim that they somehow represent labor, that they somehow represent working families, and you have all that nonsense where you have the leaders of the major labor unions, of course, are affiliated with the Democratic Party. You have this idea that the people who the Democrats claim to represent should be happy with the crumbs that they've been given by the Democratic Party, even as the policies the Democratic Party has focused on for the last 50 years, or maybe not 50 years, but certainly since Bill Clinton, definitely have been financialization policies that have clearly benefited Wall Street and the corporations at the expense of workers. I mean, we see that on a number of levels, and just this idea that they have been complicit in this squeezing everything to the top that has, has just led to ruin for millions of American families. But the Democrats want to keep that facade of that we are for working people. And they have not been since, again, really since McGovern, probably. I mean, maybe you can make an argument that under Carter, but after that, no.
So you went into detail about the sort of legal effort that was happening behind the scenes, I guess, throughout the month of June to get you guys off the ballot. But alongside that legal effort, there was also a sleazy, I don't know what you would call PR effort or a, direct communication effort by the Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee to sort of harass people who already signed your petition to withdraw their names from your petition. So do you want to speak to that a bit?
Right. And I would call it fraud because that's basically what it is. It's funny that we're the ones being accused of fraud and there's no evidence. And meanwhile, we have plenty of fraud that's documented by the Democratic Party and the Elias law firm. So in parallel to these issues with the State Board of Elections, a few weeks ago, we got notified that the Elias Law Group was down here. Elias Law Group is Mark Elias's law firm. Mark Elias, if people aren't familiar with him, he is arguably the most prominent attorney in the Democratic Party. And if you don't know him, go and look him up on Wikipedia and you'll understand that argument that he's the most prominent attorney for the Democrats. We were told about 3 weeks ago they were down here. And then about 2 weeks ago, we started getting calls from people saying, hey, I got a phone call asking me to take my name off your petition. And then almost immediately, we started getting other contacts saying, I got contacted by you guys, meaning the Green Party, asking me to take your names off the petition. And we said, what are you talking about? And what it was is that the Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee, via the Elias law firm, was calling people who had signed our petition, asking them to remove their names. And it's under the guise of some type of petition integrity that they're calling just to make sure people did sign. But as soon as people say they did sign, they launch into a whole political ask, a whole thing about how the Green Party's good for the Republicans, abortion is in the balance, it's really dangerous if the Greens get on the ballot. And sometimes they would say they're calling from the Democratic Party. Other times they would refuse to say who they're calling from. And then they start saying, like I said, that they're calling from the Green Party. And then we also had heard that they called saying they were with the State Board of Elections. So they also texted people and they showed up at people's homes, including people who had told them over the phone or by text, I don't want my name off the petition. They would still show up at people's homes. And it was harassing. They were calling people multiple times a day. A friend of mine sent me a thing from his wife, a screenshot from his wife, where she was called 4 times in 3.5 hours. Wow. So it was harassment, it was bullying, it was shaming, but most especially, it was deliberately misleading, it was fraudulent, it was lying. in order to get people to remove their names from petition. And so, it's something we were able to expose because this was over the period of time. So we were able to record it, a number of times where they were doing that.
Yeah, and one of the people who... Sorry, go ahead, Russell.
Are you able to bring suit for that?
Yeah, I can't really get into the legal stuff right now, including what we're going to do with the State Board of Elections, but we're definitely not, just going to sit back. It's funny because the Elias Law Firm, in their complaint about us that was filed on June 29th in the morning of June 30th, the Elias Law Firm alleged that we were being deceptive, that we were being fraudulent, that we weren't telling people who we were when they were signing our petitions, which is just nonsense. We had our Green Party shirts on, we had our hats, we're giving people buttons. The petition form itself says, for the creation of the Green Party. I mean, handing out literature or signs, banners, all kinds of stuff, right?
Yeah. Anyone who's seen the Green Party people working the street, exactly low key.
Exactly.
You're not trying to fly under the radar with it.
That's exactly right. We got, again, 22,500 signatures. We talked to probably twice that many people. Not once over this period that lasted for months did anyone call one of the 100 county boards of elections or the state board of election in North Carolina and say, hey, these guys are doing something shady. Not once. There's no complaints about us conducting fraud until the Elias Law Firm shows up from Washington, D.C. And then they immediately themselves launch into fraud, which has delivered a number of complaints against them to the State Board of Elections. And hopefully the State Board of Elections will pursue that. I'm a little doubtful about that, but hopefully they will.
Well, speaking of fraud, you mentioned right before we went on air, because I want to give you a chance to queue up this audio that I found. You mentioned that one of the people who they called was the co-chair of the state party. Is that right? So do you want to set this clip up? I'm sure you know what the clip is that I'm going to play.
Yeah. Again, we had known this was coming because we've been hearing about this for days. And so we could recognize, I was getting phone calls on my phone. They were calling me, I'm the candidate, you
published that, right? You tweeted out the text exchange,
exactly,
right?
text, because they texted me and I published that. I could never they had a bad auto dialer, or maybe it was my phone. Every time I tried to answer, it would just end up hanging up. But our co-chair, Tony, he was aware of it because we had known about this again for days. So when he finally got a call, he hit record on his phone or whatever he did to record it and was able to capture it.
Okay, so this is the audio of that phone call, and I guess whichever operative here was posing as, I would say, an especially passive-aggressive, self-hating Green Party member, right? Who tried to convince him to remove his signature. So let's play this. This is priceless here.
You're calling to confirm whether or not I signed a petition. Mass, who are you calling with? What organization? Oh, is this the Green Party?
Yes.
You're with the Green Party?
Yes, and we have you listed as wanting to get the candidates on the North Carolina ballot. Did you sign that petition?
So you were calling as a representative of the Green Party?
As a volunteer, yes.
Okay. Yeah, I did sign it.
Okay, and would you say you strongly support it or just somewhat support it?
I don't think I'd sign something unless I strongly support it.
Okay, well, thank you for confirming. Animal participation in elections is important if the Green Party is on the ballot. It will take votes away from Democrats, giving Republicans a huge advantage that will help them win North Carolina in 2022 and 2024. There's far too much at stake to let this happen. Are you interested in asking to have your name removed from this petition or leave it as is?
I'm confused. So if you're with the Green Party, why are you asking to remove? I'm sorry?
Yes, I totally.
Hangs up.
And that happened a number of times because, again, the word was out that they were doing this. So when our folks
the jig is up, boys.
Yeah,
it's the cops.
It seemed like maybe there was a manager listening or something. When it got complicated like that, they would disconnect
right,
it.
Somebody. Right.
They also would say things too. None of it ever really made sense because they would say things like, "It's okay to take your name off the petition because the Green Party's already on the ballot." And they have some type of explanation about how I really never understood it, but that's what they would say. They would lie about that as well. and clearly lying, misleading, and again, the harassment of it, calling people over and over, showing up at their homes, and then, bullying them, shaming them, trying to, and in their efforts over weeks to do this, they got a grand total of 140 people to remove their names. Again, how many of those were removed their names because they were lied to? I don't know. But, out of the 16,000 verified signatures, they only got 140 people to remove their names. So that even if you were to take those 140 names off, we're still almost 1,900 names more than we needed to make the ballot.
I mean, it just makes no sense. I mean, it just seems so lazily done. Like, you're posing as a Green Party volunteer who's calling Green Party members who signed your petition to ask them to take your name off the petition, and then use, like, an MSNBC talking point that, well, okay, in this very passive-aggressive, okay, fine, keep your name on there. I guess you want the Republicans to win. Like, it doesn't make any sense. It just seems so stupid and so lazily done. And here's the thing that made me suspicious, because we played the clip, which I'll edit into the YouTube video, I don't have it handy now, of the guy on the State Board of Elections, Circosta was his name, right? Something like that? Yeah. Where he mentions that there's a quote-unquote criminal investigation going on having to do with the ballot signatures and things like that.
Given what's in front of us today, I can't in good conscience vote to certify today. So I would like to wait, give our staff enough time to go through this process. If there's a motion to vote on this today, I will be voting no.
Mr. Chairman, may I be recognized?
Yeah, Mr. Hall, let's make it brief though, please.
Well, thank you. Is there any question as to the validity of the 15,953 signatures that have been validated by state county boards of elections?
Mr. Hall, I don't want to get into the details of a criminal investigation, but I have questions sufficient in number to be not willing to vote for certification today.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I asked the question because the board is effectively presuming that there is some question as to the validity of those signatures by delaying the certification and possibly rejecting the certification of the Green Party petitions. And if there is some presumption here that is operative, the presumption ought to be that validated signatures are valid, unless there is some basis for considering them invalid or at least subject to further investigation. So again, the question is there any basis for considering or questioning the validity of any one of those 15,953 validated signatures?
And I will thank you for your comments to the board. I will stand by my earlier assertion, and I will ask any other board members if they have questions.
Mr. Chairman, you have not answered the question. You are now
Mr. Hall, you're out of order, sir. Go ahead and mute Mr. Hall, please.
It strikes me as crazy that if there were any legitimacy to that investigation, don't you think the Senate campaign, the DSCC would reference that to try and get people to take their names off? Like, say, hey, there's something going on with this, with all these signatures here that's shady, maybe you don't want to be associated. Like, that seems to me that they would bring that up if there were any legitimacy, or maybe they didn't know about it. Like, it just seems to be very uncoordinated. For a party that really got their shit together when it came time to stop Bernie Sanders from being nominated, you think they would come together a little better in this effort here, but it seems to just be in shambles.
Yeah, they've been saying that. They that's one of their newer talking points, is that there's indications of fraud. When Circosta said that there was a criminal investigation, there was not a criminal investigation, in which the State Board of Elections spokesperson later clarified.
Oh, so they've admitted that was bullshit then.
Yeah, but now there was a statement last week from the spokesperson for the State Board of Elections saying there is a criminal investigation, but we've not received any word or anything about it. But also very clearly they said it's targeting specific individuals, meaning that they were looking at specific people who turned in petitions, kind of irrespective of anything we were doing.
Yeah, you mentioned. Yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Go ahead.
But the sloppiness of it has surprised us as well, and I think that really is an aspect of the arrogance of power. Right? It's just that's who they are. they think they can just stomp on us. They don't have to really put much effort into this. Who are these guys? They can't. I mean, one of the reasons why they're doing this is because they are threatened by, again, the fact that we're representing people who otherwise wouldn't be represented in those issues. And those issues then are a danger to the profits of the donors of the Democrats and Republicans. The other aspect is that they saw what we did. They know the discontent that's out there, the dismay, the disquiet with the current political situation, and they saw us go out there. They saw our folks go out there and do a bang-up job, collect those signatures. They saw the response that we received from people throughout North Carolina for it, and that threatens them. So, but this idea that they were going to do this to us and we would have no recourse, we wouldn't be able to fight back, we just roll on our backs, or we wouldn't have the ability to put up a fight, I think is just part of that whole aspect of the arrogance of power.
It seems also like it's interesting because they're doing this whole January 6th hearing, and they spent so much of Trump's presidency talking about how he's eroding the rules and the norms and the guardrails, and there's some truth to that, but it seems like it worked because it seems like everyone is willing at this point to break the rules, like the notion that there's a consequence for it, or that there are certain lines you don't cross, seem to be less and less of a thing on all sides. I was just looking today at how they changed the official White House transcript of a Joe Biden speech in which he read off the teleprompter clearly repeat line again, and they changed the transcript to say, let me repeat the line again. And if you watch
it's like the actor playing Romeo saying, take a knee,
take it right.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Saying it on stage, right?
But you look at that, and they're doing the, people are coming back at them and saying, but if you look at the video, clearly that's not what he said, and they're just doing the Monty Python dead parrot sketch. No, it's not. No, it's not. That's not what happened. No. It seems like all across the board, everyone is just willing to lie. I mean, that almost goes back to me with the Bush administration with the truthiness. And before, the Democrats were, oh my God, this is horrible. And now everyone wants to play. Like, hey, if you can just say, yeah, there may be a criminal investigation, and just make vague noises about some impropriety to throw someone off the ballot, why not? Who's going to say anything? What is Andrea Mitchell going to give a shit about Green Party candidate in North Carolina? It's not like the media is going to cover it, right? So why not cheat?
Yeah, the only rule is don't violate the money. Don't cross the money. That seems to be the only rule to me is don't look. I mean, this gets into a larger aspect. I think if we want to get into the sociological reasons for why we're here, this whole scarcity mindset that we have at being a capitalist society, this idea that you got to make it into the life raft, and if you're not in the life raft, you're going to drown. And that goes across for, right? I mean, whether it's business, whether it's media, whether it's, government, whatever it is. And so I think with the media, it becomes exactly that. It's the access. I don't want to lose the access, so I'm not going to push too hard on this. And it is we all, I mean, often, people get sick of hearing the Orwellian reference to become a cliche that things are Orwellian, but it's really cliche because it's accurate in many ways. I look at the idea that we describe everything as on this horizontal. We describe our entire political structure on a simple horizontal line, left to right. And that's supposedly able to capture all the complexity, all the nuance, right? Everything about our political structure, our system, our philosophies, all of it. And, that really is Orwellian if you get to the point of the idea of controlling speech, dictating what speech is, then affects people's ability to think about things. And if you control how they think, then that is reality. Perception is reality. And if you have this structure where, okay, the entire political system is just a simple horizontal line, and you can divide it in half, then that gets into all aspects of left versus right, binary politics, identity politics, red versus blue, but then back to this issue we talked about before about why the Democrats and Republicans hate the other third parties, hate independent candidates so much, hate grassroots opposition, because that really obstructs and tries to flip over that very simple, horizontal line narrative for how our system is when it's clearly not that.
Yeah, well, I mean, it changes the whole dynamic because not only is there, like you were just talking about, the red-blue Democrat-Republican dynamic, but it really, now especially in the Trump era, has really become a good versus evil dynamic. Whereas the Trump or the Trumpian or the Trump-led GOP represents an intrinsic evil. Therefore, anything done in service of defeating that evil, including screwing over the Green Party, who they see as taking votes from Democrats, they say, well, this is in service of this greater good, the greater good being defeating the GOP. And that's how a lot of people look at it. I mean, I looked at the responses. I'm sure you read many of them, too, when you tweeted out that text conversation. These stupid, I'm sorry, we use far worse language on a regular basis. I'm trying to keep it PG-13 here for you. But, like, you saw it, right? You saw people flooding the threads with, what is this loser Green Party candidate doing trying to get on the ballot anyway? Doesn't he understand we have to defeat the fascists? Or I'm sure you read a ton of that.
Well,
and that's where that comes from. They just don't care that this is illegitimate. They don't even care. The ultimate irony is they don't even care that their party is subverting the democratic process, which is the thing that this is all supposed to be in service of defending against the right wing. They don't even care about that. All they care about is their side winning. And if that means screwing over the Greens, then they're perfectly willing to do that. They have no remorse about it, no hesitation about it, nothing. And I'm sure you saw that in a lot of the stuff that you saw online as this story kind of blew up.
Yeah, you hear that as well. I mean, I still get that because of some of the work I've done. I've worked with a number of people who are Democratic Party loyalists. They're members of the party. They're a rapid. They're part of the party, and so their anger at me for doing this is really, I'm violating the idols of the tribe here, and I am conspiring with the other because they can only see it in this binary good versus evil manner that you're describing, Keaton. And it's just not people who are involved in the Democratic Party. It's the party membership at large, and it's for the Republicans as well. Andrew Yang was talking about this a week or two ago. I heard him on something, and he said that, about 40 to 50% of Democrats view the Republicans as evil, and a like number of Republicans view the Democrats as evil. So when you get into that conversation where the other side, and there's only one side, is evil, that plays right into the two-party structure. But where does that lead to? That leads to January 6th, and it leads to more January 6th after that. Eventually, I think we're going to start seeing political assassinations, that type of thing, because where else can this go? When you have this process of evil in the other, it has to be destroyed. There's no reconciliation with it. There's no compromise, there's no politics with it. And that's what's so dangerous. But that's where the two-party structure is always going to lead, and why we're arguing so heavily for a multi-party democracy to get at least somewhere back to, I don't know if we ever were there, but at least to get to some point of having issues-based voting where people are voting on their beliefs, their values, their conscience, what's best for them and their family, as opposed to just simply voting against the other. Which is, just a very effective way to turn out the vote among your diehards.
Yeah, and a super effective way to raise money.
Yeah,
right?
I'll say one more. Let me say one more thing too about because I do get hit with that. You're going to let the fascists win and everything else. More often than not, and I don't mean to overgeneralize here, but what I find is that those people who make those arguments generally don't have anyone in their lives who is struggling because of lack of health care. They generally don't know people who are trying to live off of $12 an hour. They generally don't know people who are drowning under debt and will never get out of it. They generally don't have those experiences. They don't have those people in their life who have overdosed because we treat addiction and substance abuse as a criminal issue rather than a public health issue. Right? So they generally are immune from that, and they're able to focus on the MSNBC drama of it all, or the Fox News drama of it all. Depending upon which way you're going. And so I think that if it was up to the Democrats or Republicans, they would love to get to the point where, in order to be a voter, you have to either subscribe to MSNBC or Fox. If they could whittle down the voters down to that, right? But I also too see this.
Oh, we're practically there.
Yeah, exactly. I know, it's sad, right? But the idea, though, what I see, though, like people who contest me about this generally don't have those concerns in their lives or in their loved ones. Like I said, their people in their lives are not checking their banking accounts before going to see the doctor, so they're untouched by these other issues. And funny you mentioned Twitter, because one of the things I did see on Twitter was someone who said something along the lines about how the only issues that matter are the issues that stand between the GOP and the Democrats. Nothing else matters. This person's Twitter profile was of them showing a horse. Of course, that doesn't matter, right? I mean, this is obviously someone who shows horses, doesn't have these mundane concerns about, look, in North Carolina, half our school kids in North Carolina qualify for free student lunch. That's the state of our state, right? Half of our kids qualify for, and meanwhile, all those issues don't matter.
Right.
It's very,
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, we did a segment on this last night, but that's where I think a lot of this Democrat love for Liz Cheney is coming from now, right? And you even hear people like Robert Reich saying, well, yeah, I disagree with her on everything, but that's not important right now. The policies aren't important right now. What's important is that we protect democracy from Donald Trump, right? And that's a very privileged take because, like you just said, people who are checking their bank account before they go to the doctor don't have the luxury of thinking in terms of these bigger sort of like theoretical ideas, number one. But number two, I think the larger point is that the people who are not checking their bank balance before they go to the doctor, they're the ones on both the left and the right who are voting now. They're the ones who are taking part in the electoral process, which is one of the reasons why I think it's so hard for third parties to break through, because you guys are trying to mobilize a section of the population that, I mean, you've spoken about it in here right on this interview, have really been overcome by despair. I think despair is the biggest obstacle right now, is just convincing people who are in that spot that politics can be wielded for their benefit. Right. I don't think that is a reality that a lot of these people you're talking about are able to grasp, because it just seems so impossible. It seems so rigged against them because it is rigged against them. And now you're seeing that rigging take shape right in front of your eyes with a situation like what's happening here.
Right. This is the edifice that Martin Luther King spoke about. When King spoke about the idea that true compassion is not flipping a coin to a beggar, it's taking on the edifice that creates beggars. This is the edifice that he was talking about. This Leviathan, if you will, that exists, that brings everything to the top for the benefit of the few at the expense of the many. And this is what people witness their whole life. And so then to be excluded from the political process, whether, through outright voter suppression or by the fact that despair, this is not going to work, why continue to do it? It's a very effective strategy to keep everything at the top, to continue those, these policies that suppress the working and now the middle class. I don't know how much of a difference there is anymore between the working class and the middle class when almost 2/3 of Americans are reporting they're living paycheck to paycheck.
You don't even hear middle class anymore. Nobody even says that anymore.
No, I mean, I don't think, I don't,
at this point, yeah.
I don't know how it exists for way too many people. I mean, the amount of, look, and how does this survive is something that's very concerning. This is not sustainable. We have here in North Carolina, 1 in 4 adults are in collections for medical debt. Collections, not in medical debt, collections from it. How is that sustainable? 1 in 4. I mean, how is that sustainable? Like, how is that? When I heard that, I had to go look up the source myself, that read the study myself to make sure it was accurate, because it's so unimaginable. But even beside the morality of that, the justice or the lack of justice in that, just if you just take a pure numbers, dollars and cents, like academic approach to that, how is that sustainable? I mean, that should be a flashing red light that you are collapsing your society, and that's just medical debt, let alone all the other issues people are burdened with. But it is, I mean, this idea of taking on that edifice is really difficult. It's really challenging. And it's one of the things that we are working on to try and bring more people into the political process. I should say that we don't believe the political process by itself is the answer. That the political party cannot be, cannot exist just simply for and by itself. It must be part of a larger movement. It must just simply be one arm of a movement. And that movement must represent, in this case, working families. And then that movement must also include direct action, civil disobedience, labor organizing, communications, education, the community and mutual aid, those types of things and many other things. And the political party is just one part of that body. And it has to be subservient to the constituency it represents, because otherwise, if it's not, what you get is the Democratic and Republican parties who are in existence for themselves through the donations by their, major big money donors.
Yeah, so I just have a couple more questions. We are going to wrap fairly soon, but we just laid it out here. You just laid it out really well for us. What's happened to you, how the system is rigged in so many ways against an underclass of people who cannot afford medicine, and against any sort of organized political effort to represent that section of people. And so one of the questions that I have for you that I think is important to get your take on is how do you think third parties can break through? Because unfortunately, one of the things that's really unfortunate about what's happening to you is not just that it's unfair to you and your campaign and what you've done, but these are exactly the kind of stories that I feel discourage people from participating in third party politics. This is why so much of this energy is now wasted on trying to reform the Democratic Party from within, right? Because the answer that people give you when you say, because I'm on the page of, fuck that. That ship has sailed. That's hopeless. These parties are beyond reform, beyond any kind of repair from the inside. But then they will point to something like this and say, well, yeah, I mean, you're probably right. But on the other hand, look how difficult the system makes it for the Greens. And so, therefore, what choice do we have but to try and reform one of these two major parties from within? So what would be your answer to that? Because it's a tough question. In spirit, yes, I'm with all these outside groups. I've spoken favorably of Andrew Yang's Forward, and obviously, we're having you on with the Greens. So what would be your answer to that? How do you push through this?
Yeah, no, and I see that. I saw someone the other day said something. Oh, and actually, we've been getting very good local media coverage on this. And the major newspaper in North Carolina quoted someone who said, I'm for the Greens, but they're not going to change anything overnight, so I'm going to continue to vote for the Democrats. And it's just that kind of idea that if you don't do it, if we don't build it, it's not going to occur. And it's not, and that's part of it. We are up against this edifice, this Leviathan. We're in this David versus Goliath fight, and that the odds are, I don't want to say the odds are against us, but we have to continue to build, and we have to understand what we are up against and find the cracks, the fissures that we can exploit. We can't just run headlong into the edifice, right? We have to take it on smartly. We have to do it asymmetrically. We also have to utilize the energy that exists among people, that dismay, that anger, that desperation, and utilize that to build something, or continue to build, because people have been doing this for a long time, continue to build, find those cracks, exploit those cracks, and break it open. The whole kind of levee eventually will break. And it's going to take time. And it's going to take a lot of resources. And it's not easy. And there's going to be many more failures before there are successes. But we also have opportunities to have success. And with that, we have to then exploit that and, proverbially run with it. So the idea that it's somehow going to come out of the ground like a weed, no, it's not. And if people have that idea, or that's what they're holding on to, please disabuse yourself of it. This is a very hard fight. It's a very long fight, but it's a fight that if we do not engage in, we just have the deadly status quo. And this idea, as you said, Keaton, the idea that we're going to reform the Democratic Party from within is just madness. It's just nonsense. It's not going to happen. Show me what glimmer of hope because we've got the squad now. You've got 5 people, 6 people. I mean, like, and they've not been able. Meanwhile,
well, you got 5 people who bow their heads when they're told.
Yeah, exactly. You know, I mean, so
they're very good at tweeting.
Yeah, they are. And what we see, though, is we know from history that, you know, you can build these movements. You know, so if I look at like was my strategy here, or it's one to help build this movement, build this party as part of a larger movement. But then 2, it's to, you know, in our history, third parties have brought about issues that the other 2 parties have then been forced to take on. And I'm thinking most especially of the populist or People's Party in the late 19th century, the Progressive and Socialist Party in the early 20th century, you know, especially talk about like the labor laws. They were so popular that the Democrats and Republicans were forced to bring those on. So I don't care who brings single payer health care to our people, as long as somebody does it. It could be Mitch McConnell for all I care, as long as we get single payer health care, right? I mean, it's like, and then the third part of that is that if we continue to run multiple candidates in this first past the post system, this 2-party system, it will break the system. And then they'll have to go to ranked choice voting. They'll have to go to proportional representation eventually. But it needs to be a consistent pressure put on the system to change, because otherwise the system will just ignore it. So, I mean, that's kind of like the 3-pronged strategy I see here. And it's going to take time. It's going to take a lot of resources. But it's worthwhile because the alternative is the status quo.
Excellent. All right. Before we wrap, I want you to let people know what the status of your effort to get back on. I'm sorry, Russell, did you have any questions before
That
we
was
wrap?
exactly what I was going to ask.
Okay, great. We're on the same page then. Yeah. What is the status of your effort to get back on the ballot? How can people help? What can people do to get involved?
Yeah, so we are fighting this. We've got a variety of legal and administrative recourses available to us, and we are pursuing those, and we're fully gonna fight it. Like the idea that we're gonna lay down and not let it just let it happen. That's they didn't know who they were dealing with. And I'm sorry, my dogs are acting up. It's getting close to dinner time. But the great panic.
2 cats and a dog.
Yeah, the great panic is setting in. You know, the thing about it is, we're not going to lay down and accept it. We are going to get our rightful place on the ballot that we earned. And, you know, the way people can help is go to MatthewHoferSenate.org. The primary way people can help right now is to donate, because we are in this David versus Goliath fight. We will be in court, and we need money for that. And so if you can donate, and please encourage others to donate. If you'd like to volunteer, we can use all kinds of help. Even folks from outside the state can help us. And then the other aspect is to let people know about what is going on, to share this, talk to people about it, to let people know that this is occurring. This all proves our point about the 2-party system. And so the more people who see this and understand it, they will be inspired to act. By extension, then I'll say to folks is continue to support folks like Keaton and Russell. Because when I talked about the body before, that communication piece that they do is what I believe to be the linchpin of the movement. So that's the 3 ways people can help. Please donate. If you want to participate in this David and Goliath fight and help us, please donate to us. Encourage others to donate. If you can volunteer, and then please share and support media like what Keaton and Russell do.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for that. That was the best closing statement of any guest we've ever had.
Yeah.
No, I mean, look, in all seriousness, one of the reasons we started this podcast is just I felt an imperative to try and be part of, you know, an albeit disorganized movement to counter the corporate media, because you have to. There is no alternative to that. We have the tools. We have an internet. We have podcasts. There are videos. There's ways to do it. And you have to do it, because as long as the voting public especially is under the spell of channels like Fox, CNN, and MSNBC, there's no hope. There's no hope. They'll never get any sort of messaging that will lead them to any other direction but reinforcement of this sort of status quo.
Absolutely. Hey, a few weeks ago, National Academy of Sciences came out and they said that 1 out of 3 Americans who died from COVID died because of lack of health care. So more than 300,000 Americans have died because they couldn't go to a doctor because they couldn't pay. That should have been the biggest story. It was nowhere.
Right.
Democracy
Exactly,
Now and a few other places, and that was it, And it wasn't like it was I came up with this in my bedroom one night. No, this is the National Academy of Science. It's peer reviewed. I mean, the Lancet has said similar things. I mean, like this is, and it's not being reported. People don't hear that because we have this corrupted media. So yeah, it is. I mean, and again, it's serious. The idea that you guys being this linchpin that connects everyone in the movement, that educates, communicates, organizes around that is I'm very serious about, very sincere about it. It's a focal point. If we don't have that, we are in a place now that we couldn't have been in 10 years ago because, we've been on 10 years ago, we were trying to do this on Skype and it would not have worked well. Right. I mean, like, so yeah, I mean, here we are. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, they couldn't cover that. They were too busy getting people obsessed with people who didn't want to put masks on or get vaccines. They're too busy getting us angry at each other, which is what they excel at.
Right, exactly.
You heard Matthew say how to get involved, MatthewHopeforSenate.org, right? That's the donate link. We'll put that in the show notes.
Thank
All
you.
right. Well, Matthew, thank you so much for coming on. Really appreciate it. Great to talk to you and best of luck.
Yeah, thanks, guys. I appreciate it.
Please clap.